you see me get up and go like this, it means wrap it.
I'm not looking at the clock either, so it's a good time.
George is so wide that I can't see you, even though you're beautiful and all that sort of thing.
No, I'll stand up and do it. If you see me stand up and go like that, it means wrap it.
Wrap it up.
George, I'll be sending you WhatsApp messages.
Yep, I'm going to be looking for it.
I'll give you time as well as time progressed, not time leaving. 70 seconds. Oh, actually, let's turn this one down.
David, we Glengarry boys, we don't read or write too good. But we also not good on numbers either. People take advantage of us.
Well, if you talk too fast, you'll have to ask you to repeat yourself. I'm only from the country. You need to talk slower. I grew up in Burke, Bob. 30 seconds.
30 seconds, Bob.
20. 10. 3, 2, 1.
G'day, I'm George Christensen, the National Director of Citizen Go here in Australia, and thank you for joining us for our second live stream. We had 10,000 people tune in to us actually for the last live stream that we did with Senator Malcolm Roberts. We've got another very special guest here tonight. He is one of the most colourful and recognised statesmen in this country. I won't say politician, because I will say statesman. That's what he is. I'm joined by the member for Kennedy, Bob Catter. He's instantly recognisable with his trademark Akubra, which you see you got there on the desk, Bob, which wears just about anywhere and everywhere. Been in politics for decades. How long have you served, Bob, in the federal and state parliaments combined?
Over half a century.
Over half a century.
I'm the longest serving Australian history. This is where it gets bad. Someone's really is the most detestable person in Australian political history. So it's not good, it's not to be excited about.
Interesting times back then. They stuck around for a long time in the parliament. But Bob's was originally a member of the National Party, which, interestingly, I was a member of the National Party. Country Party.
Yeah.
Yes, Country Party, sorry.
Yeah, we
It was.
changed our name. Yeah.
And it's the same party that I belong to, but Bob left famously back in the early late 90s, I think it was, formed first run as an independent, and then he formed the Catter's Australia Party. He represents the electorate of Kennedy, a big rural and regional community there, spanning a lot of Western Queensland and North Queensland. It's cattle heartland. A lot of different cane, sugarcane, bananas, the lot. There used to be a few other crops until government basically destroyed them. So, Bob, we're talking tonight about something that I think that you're in a very good position to talk about because of your record, and that is the undermining of Australia's national sovereignty. Citizen Go is an organisation which is dedicated to a number of things. We're pro-life, we're pro-family, we're pro-freedom. But one thing that people don't, dial in too much for us about, which is what we're here for as well, is about patriotism. And so we don't want to see national sovereignty undermined. We want to see Australia belong to Australians. We want to see control of all Australia's policy belong to Australians, not its international bodies. And we had that increasingly during my time in Parliament, and I reckon that you would have seen it more in the half a century that you've served. Where you see these things creeping in from the United Nations and laws and legislations and bills and regulations that are being proposed, which have their genesis somewhere else, the UN in New York or in Geneva or the World Health Organization. what do you think about this, Bob? Because both parties have done this, right?
George, I was at a meeting and I was talking about, what we believe, and this old cocky up the back said, yeah, you know what they say about your neighbour when he starts preaching religion? Yeah, reach for your branding iron. It's the same in the bush. Your neighbour starts preaching religion, reach for your branding iron. He said, yeah, well, when your politician starts talking about ideas and principles, he said, reach for your shooting iron. No, but there is a mistrust in the areas where you and I come from, the Mackays and the Cairns and the Innisfails and Mount Isa. There is a basic mistrust of ideology. And, I mean, Germany got carried away with communism, and then it got carried away with fascism. And that ideology in Russia and Mao Zedong, 48 million people dead in China, 28 million people dead in Russia, and Hitler, maybe about 23 million in the Second World War. So ideology, I get worried.
And that the globalist ideology is front and centre.
It's a cancer. In my opinion, it's cancer.
And we've seen it most recently. One of the things that we're hot to trot on at the moment is about a bill that's before the Parliament. It's to establish, there's already a Centre for Disease Control in Australia, but it hasn't got any authority from the Parliament yet. So the Labor Party now, the Albanese Labor government, is bringing in this bill that will give the Centre for Disease Control authority, and the authority is going to be minus ministerial oversight. A minister will not be able to overturn a decision that the head of the CDC makes. They will be tasked with basically implementing rules and regulations that come out of the World Health Organization, that wonderful organization that helped us so much during the pandemic, backed by Bill Gates and doing the behest of China. And so there will be this little entity in the Australian government bureaucracy that'll be getting its marching orders from Geneva, and Australian politicians, neither a minister nor the Parliament, will be able to override what it says. How dangerous is that?
I want to make a statement. I want to make Gumtree's statement, and I'm emulating the great Huey Long in America, most popular politician in American history. He was shot dead, assassinated before the presidential elections, which, on the basis of polling, he would have won. He was running as an independent, by the way. I just if you are controlled by, and in Australia it's much worse than in other countries because Canberra is completely cut off from Australia. The only part of Australia that voted yes was Canberra, and it voted very strongly yes.
The voice referendum, you're right.
The rest of Australia voted very strongly no, and it was every part of Australia, every city, every state, almost every town voted no. And that was true in the first Australian areas, that I represent even. They were very suspicious of anything. And I got a lot of time for Nolly Pearson, a lot of respect. But that other lady, no, in fact, I may have even called her a white sepulchre one occasion. But, they had no illusions. They wasn't going to give power to them. It was going to give power to those people. And as I say, I've got great respect for no, in this case, Nolly Pearson's, and I'm trying to think of the lady's name. It's not coming to me. But they were the sort of people that are going to get power out of that. And, the average first Australian bloke in community area is not good. You could see that. Distrust of ideology, particularly foreign ideologies.
And so you've seen, I guess, treaty upon treaty upon treaty, going back to, for instance, the Lima Declaration, gas, a whole heap of trade deals that whittled away things. What these treaties do and what handing over power to foreign bodies and saying we're going to abide by your rules. You know what it does, because you've had scores of farms and well, not just scores, probably thousands actually, of farms and industries, rural industries across Australia that you've seen over the last 50 years, where you've been a member of Parliament, either state or federal, just wind up because of this?
In 1990, the wool was the biggest export earner for Australia, bigger than coal in 1990, and Keating deregulated 1992 and completely and utterly destroyed it. There were 370 million sheep in Australia. Now there's under 3 million and they won't last long. So he completely wiped out the major source of income for this country. In 1991, you are well aware, George, that all of the sugar mills were owned by the farmers, except 3 that were owned by a company in Brisbane, CSR. But all the rest were owned by the farmers. Now, every single sugar mill is owned by a foreign corporation. And because they're screwing the farmers through the floor, they're owning more and more of the farmland. You yourself told me that, there's big movements in the Greater Eyre area, for example. And that's true further north. But you have to sit there and watch every single thing that our forebears worked so hard for. Most of them started life as cane cutters, as you're well aware. They lived on dirt floors. 1 in 30 of them went in the cane fields, never came back out again. 1 in 30 that went down the mines never came back up alive. It was really hard. And yet, until about 30 years ago, we had created the wealthiest state on earth. Now, I can just see it all dissipating. 2/3 of our income from overseas. We want to buy motorcars from overseas. We want to buy all our petrol from overseas. We want to buy all of our clothing from overseas, our underwear from overseas. But you've got to have money to buy it. Where are you going to get the money from? Well, you've only got 3 sources of income: iron ore, coal, and gas. They're 120 billion. The next thing down, maybe gold, maybe beef. They're about 15 billion. The big boys are 120 billion.
Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people that think that we can sustain economy off, hairdressing and selling each other coffee. So, that's the reality. And you can't. You've got to have something to sell the rest of the world to bring money in.
Oh, yeah, but see, we are getting our electricity for free. Isn't that a huge breakthrough?
How is that happening?
Well, I put the first standalone solar system in Australia, and I had to batter through a pretty conservative bloody cabinet room, I can tell you. But I know all about it. But I wanted to produce high-tech silicon, not silicon panels, but high-tech silicon. And I'm a mining man. I sort of know my chemistry and that. And the amount of CO2 in smelting that glass is huge. Then our instructions were that you have to clean the glass every fortnight. Nobody in Australia cleans this glass every fortnight. They don't even clean them once every 2 years.
But it's sort of interesting, actually, because what I think what's essentially happened is we've had globalist ideology, foreign ideology that has come in economically and has crushed, through trade deals and that sort of thing, it has crushed rural industries, it's crushed primary industries, it's crushed manufacturing in Australia. Then we've had the globalist ideology in the form of climate change come in, and that's crushing a lot of the remaining industries, and it is certainly completely just about killed off the old style manufacturing. But they want to crush coal, and they want to crush anything that's got anything to do with carbon emissions. And I
But
want
they
you to
won't go to
comment on
ethanol, George.
that.
They won't go to ethanol.
They won't go to.
I mean, if you're fetting about CO2, why wouldn't you go to ethanol?
Well, my view is, I think you asked me the question, why wouldn't they? Because it relies on an agricultural sector, and they think agriculture's bad. That's why. That
is correct. A member of Parliament, I won't mention his name because I like him, but he said, I will agree to anything. He was referring to ethanol. I'll agree to anything so long as it does not put an extra square metre under the plough. Well, my aim in life is to turn North Queensland, particularly far North Queensland, into a food bowl for the world. I represent half of Australia's water runoff. And as you're well aware, except for the dam at Ayr, which is right at the mouth of the river, so no benefit for anyone except the people at the mouth of the river. And there's a small dam in Mareeba and a couple of little tiny ones in Mackay. But it's less than 1% of that water is being used.
Nothing major.
And we don't have rivers. I mean, we used to have a flood, a massive flood, and then a dry riverbed. Well, it's not as if we're going to curtail a river running to the sea. That is not what happens there. So but people don't understand their own country, and they're being driven by foreign ideologies.
And I think what's happening, Bob, is this globalist ideology. It's come for our economy. It got it largely through trade deals, GATT, Lima, all those sort of things. And we've seen as a result wreckage economically in Australia. We've then got the climate change thing that's still currently, putting a wrecking ball through Australia right now with manufacturing, household power prices. But now we've got a third one. You may have heard of the United Nations Agenda 2030. It used to be called Agenda 21. Now it's called Agenda 2030. They actually were just over there last week in New York, where they were trying to seal the deal on this Agenda 2030. And a lot of it, Bob, actually is beyond the economics. It's beyond the climate change, although that stuff's in there. It's going after social stuff. So they're now pushing things like censorship, which they call combating misinformation. They're talking about things like gender and ensuring that if a young boy thinks he's a girl, that our education system enables them to be a girl. They're talking about things like what they call reproductive rights and sexual health, but what they mean by that is abortion. And all of this is being done under the banner of developing and progressing. And I just got to say that, wow, if what happened with the progress and development economically led to this ruin in our economy, if what happened to the climate change stuff is actually causing all this harm at the moment with power prices, can you imagine what the next globalist agenda, which is talking about our social fabric, is going to do to our country?
I thought what Audrey's books, The Territorial Imperative and Social Contract, that I thought they're probably the best books ever written on how to understand the world. And he uses the phrase, the ideology of extinction. That's not the words he used, but that's sort of what he's getting at. And well, the leadership in Australia would be a good example of that. When 20 Australians die, they're only replaced by 15 people. So we are a dying race and vanishing at a fair rate of knots. There is one good aspect, though. The ones that are vanishing fastest are the bad guys, and the good guys, well, will be holding ground. But the bigger picture is you belong to a vanishing race. And the ultimate statement upon a race of people is that they simply vanish from the gene pool. And there are a whole race of people that have simply vanished from the gene pool. Easter Island is
I don't like what you've just told me there, because it's very sad, but I want to say I like that phrase, because you have described the Australian people as a race. In fact, I think that was the name of your book, wasn't it? What was the title of that book?
An Incredible Race of People.
Yeah. And so you maintain we are the Australian race.
Yeah. And we are very, very, very different. Our leadership is not. Our leadership is globalist and internationalist and ideologically driven. But ordinary people, that go to work in steel cap boots and hard hats that you and I both represented in North Queensland, they're not like that. Ordinary people are not like that. The people that work in your hospitals, they're just not like that.
So, Bob, we're going to go on to the hot issue of immigration, which actually is linked to this Agenda 2030, because one of the things they want is open borders and mobility for people right across the world. And I think that's a very bad thing. We've got to have strong borders. We've got to have tight controls on migration. It shouldn't be mass migration like we've got at the moment. But the reality is that Australian race that you're talking about, and the culture, more to the point of this country, comes from 3 nations: England, Ireland, Scotland, and probably a little bit of Welsh, someone said. I don't know too much of the Welsh, but England, Scotland, and Ireland, right? That fusion helped create this accent that we both speak. That fusion created
Union Jack.
The politics, Union Jack, of course, our flag. But it also was the thing that created the poets, you know, the banjos, the Henry Lawsons. It created our literature. It created our culture, our humour, you know, our lifestyle. And when you have, as the Labor Party are doing right now, bringing in 1,500 people plus every single day into this country, I can only think, and a lot of those are from not those countries, not England, Scotland, Ireland, or anywhere like that. They're very different cultures. What's going to eventually happen? Are you going to wipe out the culture?
Yes, and we will be gone. But and this will be the first time I sort of floated this in the public arena. I'm going to be saying no migration without integration. And I'm going to say it again and again and again, and I'm not going to apologise to anyone for it. And I sort of hinted at that when I was going to punch the bloke out, you know. And you know, you don't say that to Cloncurry boys unless you got a good doctor.
Look, I just want to say in your defence, like a lot of people, actually, I think that a lot of people went, you know, some of these reporters need a bit of a smack upside the head, you know. But the guy had put to you that you were not Australian.
That was the point. He put to me that I wasn't Australian. And my uncles, anytime anyone even thought that they weren't Australian, it was out the back of the pub and you got a big hiding. And they could both bloody fight, my uncles. Bad bastards, excuse my bad language. Hey, George, coming back though, no migration without integration.
Yep.
What we will be saying, and we're saying it for the first time on your program, right? Do they come from countries with democracy? Do they come from countries with rule of law? Do they come from countries with Christianity? And when I say Christianity, the Sikhs religion is almost identical to Christianity. Buddhism is, you know, love your neighbour and, you know, be good to other
people. The values of Christianity you're talking about. Yeah.
But I use the word Christianity. Do they have industrial awards? Do they have egalitarian traditions? No. What the hell are you bringing them to this country for? And they're never going to integrate. They're never going to be. They live in little ethnic enclaves in Sydney and Melbourne. And I'll give you the actual figures. 92% of the people migrating to Australia, and that does not include the ones coming on the student visas, which is a bigger group of people. They never go home.
That's a scam. That's an absolute
that's
scam.
A scam. And, you know, the most powerful, important person in universities in Australia said, if you stop student universities from being visa wholesalers or visa salesmen, he said, you'll close half the universities in Australia. I said, is that your opinion? No, he said, it's in 3 reports to the University Council of Australia. Half the universities in Australia are dependent upon selling, being sales for visas. They just simply don't go home. Now, when I asked the question
so
in
universities have become a visa scam.
Tony Abbott tried to get them kicked out of the country because they'd overstayed their visas.
Yep.
And he got kicked out. They called him a racist for doing it. So, you know, when they dig in, but I'm not apologising to anyone, no migration without integration. And you say, well, who would you bring in? Well, if you say those are the 5 things, Filipinos tick all the boxes. Poland ticks all the boxes. I can go on. The Sikhs in India, their religion is almost identical to Christianity. You know, I could go on, but I'm just saying, if they don't meet that 5 criteria, they don't come here. And there's some very dangerous people coming to this country.
I-
Very dangerous people.
Look, I should put a shout out because we've been going for about half an hour now. And if anyone's got a question for Bob, put it down in the comments, and we'll ask Bob that question. So type away and bring in your questions. But Bob, I always had the belief that it's almost the reverse of what you're saying here. Well, not the reverse. I'm just going about it a different way. Any country where there is a high degree of radicalism and violent extremism, high degree of terrorism, things like that, it's just simply no. You do not enter. That no one enters Australia from those countries because there is a risk to a social fabric. There's a security risk. Simply don't do it.
And I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm talking about the Middle East, right?
Yep.
But I'm not.
And Africa, parts of Africa as well.
And Africa, yes, very much so. I mean, the murder of Christians in Nigeria is absolutely horrific. But there's 4 wars going on. It's just violence. They accept violence on a scale that, now, you notice I haven't used the word Islam because I have a lot to do with Indonesia, live cattle trade and all that. In fact, I was with the Indonesian ambassador last week. He wanted a meeting with me. And but I found them, should I say the word Christian? they're very much
they're
deferring
moderate,
and well-mannered and
Indonesians,
civilized people. And we're very lucky to have them as neighbours, in my opinion. So
you don't find that a lot of them want to migrate to Australia either.
Well, that's true. But that mob from the Middle East, they expect us to become like them. They're never going to become Australians. And I don't hesitate to say that.
Yeah, it's very, very sad. I mean, when I started going down to Sydney and walking around in certain suburbs there, and you look around and you see, there's nothing wrong with it per se, but I mean, it just is a sign, a literal sign out the front of a cafe, a Turkish coffee and smoke on the hooker, $15, and you think to yourself, wow, we're in Australia, and that's the thing that they're enticing people in to come into their cafe on. And I thought to myself, I could be walking around in the Middle East here for everything I'm seeing. The only difference is this first world infrastructure. And I just worry about the day that the first world infrastructure slips and dips. But this conversation we're having, Bob, I got to tell you, I'm worried that this time next year we won't be able to have it. And I'll tell you why I'm worried, because I don't know if you noticed, but there was the Albanese government back in September last year appointed a special envoy to combat Islamophobia. And that envoy to combat Islamophobia dropped his report, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or it might have been last week. Anyway, the thing that there's a whole heap of stuff in this report, a whole heap of rubbish, by the way, but a lot of it was based around amping up hate speech laws, discrimination laws, to bring Islam in and put it on the basis of a race.
And you can't criticise.
Yeah. Like 18C, you can't say much in relation to First Nations people, Aboriginal people, the certain things that you couldn't say. And they want Islam on the same par as that, a religion. And I find that, like, even though I'm a Christian, but hey, Christianity is a belief system and it's open to criticism. I just think, wow, are we bringing back blasphemy laws here?
The federal government was moving legislation so that I couldn't say what I've just said. And, George, you probably, when you look back on it, you probably don't realise decisions were taken because you were there and they didn't want you crossing the floor and showing them up. And you and I both know there are at least 3 cases of that I knew of. But nobody does that now. Nobody crosses the floor, neither Labor or Liberal.
Sad.
Well, you're there to represent the people that voted for you, not some political party run out of Sydney or Canberra or Brisbane. But forget about that for a moment. Let me come back to the migration debate because this matter is very serious. There would be pretty close to 500,000 people coming in, and most of them coming in through student. There's a lot of other visas as well. But if you put it all together, you're looking at 500,000 people.
Mm.
Well, there's only 26 million people in Australia. So over 20 years. And some of those groups, Middle Eastern mob being one of them, they have a prolific number of kids. You know, they're allowed to have a number of wives as well. So out of all proportion, their numbers will grow. Whereas we Australians, we're a vanishing race, which is another aspect of what worries me. But, you know, we want to affirm our values, and George, that's not happening in the schools. I mean, if you showed them the $10 note, they'd have no idea who Banjo Patterson was. I don't think, would be my opinion. But I remember going to the art gallery, and for rough nuts sort of bloke from Cloncurry like myself. But I've always loved art. But I went to Melbourne Art Gallery, and they had the triptychs there, you know, the Kit Kat ad. And I never ever ceased to be moved by it. And there was a girl sitting with legs akimbo, looking at the three pictures, you know. And remember the first picture, there's a bloke out there with an axe, you know, and has working away, and there's a plough there beside him. He's got a bit of a field there, and in the distance, a little tiny few houses, you know, through the trees you can see. And in the second picture, he's sitting there having, his wife's bought him lunch, and he's got the plough stopped. And in the distance, you can see a town, you know. In the third picture, there are two graves, and in the distance, there's a beautiful, rich city. And, you know, I think Frederick Company catches so much that's good about Australia in those three pictures. But I want to tell you one other story, George. And I try to tell this every school that, you know, try and keep me out of schools, of course. What I say is not in agreement with what a lot of school teachers believe. But I said, kids, you know, I was the historian for the 49th Battalion, and we were at war when I was only 18 years of age with Indonesia. There's a very bad man that got control there, and they've been wonderful neighbours to us, the best possible neighbours to us ever since. But there was a war on, and then we're at war in Vietnam. So I'm only 18 years of age, and I'm going off to war. And I was a platoon sergeant, platoon commander, 32 men underneath me. And I was in the 49th Battalion, and I was the unit historian. And I said to the colonel, I said, well, we covered ourselves in glory in the First World War. But in the Second World War, we fell back. We failed the whole ground. We retreated, wilted under fire. So what do you want to do, Cutter? I want to go down to the RSL, because it's only 18 years after the Second World War had finished. And I want to go down to the RSL and ask around, because we might have been a fallback battalion. But then again, a lot of these reports, we may not have been either. So he said, do that, Cutter. So anyway, I went down to the RSL at Whitecall there, about 100 people there. And I yelled out, anyone here know anything about the 49th Battalion in the war? And the bloke yelled out, yeah, mate, come down here. He said, the 49th Battalion are the worst hit of all. He said, when they were relieved at the bottom of the track at Santa Nanda, there are only 28 of them able to walk out unassisted. And I said, 28. He said, 28. I said, 28. He said, 28. So you know how many men left Port Moresby? 783 men left Port Moresby. And he said 783, and I said 783. And, you know, Cloncurry boys don't cry, so I find difficulty in talking about that. But, you know, that's just so inspirational. You know, and the average age was 18. The average age was 18.
And I wonder when those blokes who, you know, risk life and limb, they'd look at the nation today and think, well,
what did I do it for? What did I do it for? But the foreigners are just taking over completely. All our value system is being spat upon. What we used to call jokes, now you'd be put in jail for.
Well, that's where I'm getting at. I want to continue on that, but I've got to go to questions we've got in. But I'm going to go back to that point. So Joe Mobbs has asked, how can we stop this Agenda 2030? How can we stop the World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, and Agenda 2030 when our government is not listening? How do we stop this globalist agenda, Bob?
I had 6 weeks off. I had a minor operation, but I couldn't get around for about 6 weeks. I did a lot of thinking, and George, I keep asking myself. I mean, all politicians say, "Oh, the world's going to come to an end unless you vote for me," and I keep asking myself, "Is that what I'm saying here?" But I don't think so. We only have 3 sources of income: iron ore, coal, and gas. They're $120,000 million a year. The next thing down is only about 15,000 million, which is gold or beef or something like that. So you've got the 3 big ones. Well, the gas was given away for nothing. And Mount Isa at the present moment, the 3rd biggest industrial centre in Australia, is closing down unless we get reserve resource policy. All of our power comes from gas, and the gas is foreign owned, and we pay $16.60 for it, where the Americans and the Russians, our competitors in fertiliser, for example, they pay $6. They pay $6. We're paying $16. I mean, and we just can't survive. But the government believes in free trade. Well, nobody else does. I mean, you and I both come from the sugar industry. Europe gets $740 a tonne for their sugar for the last 10-year average.
Subsidies
America gets 720, right? Brazil gets about $470, cost subsidised from ethanol. Thailand, believe it or not, gets about $400 a tonne, and Australia gets $270 a tonne. I mean, so who's free trading? America's not, Europe's not, Brazil's not. Well, who the bloody hell is?
Yeah,
tell me.
Us dummies, because America's certainly not now. I mean, with
Donald
Trump
and
the tariffs.
God bless Donald Trump, because China has just had the greatest dream run with a mob of imbeciles against them, like the Europeans. The subsidy on industrial mineral processing is 5% of their GDP. Every $100 in China, $5 goes on subsidising. So how is our copper smelter in Mount Isa going to stay alive against that? But even if you didn't have that, we're paying $16.60 for our electricity, our power, and our mineral processors, where our competitors paying $6. So who was responsible for this piece of idiocy? And I was speaking to a federal minister, and she said, "We in the ALP will never see a job lost." And I said, "Well, I hate to tell you bluntly, and I'm not going to quote you in the media, but that was a very foolish statement to make. Paul Keating abolished the wool scheme, and nearly 80,000 shearers who founded your party had their livelihoods completely and utterly destroyed." When I say shearers, people that worked in the industry.
Yep.
Completely and utterly destroyed. The biggest source of income for this country, you destroyed. But you said your party never removed a job. And Jackie Trad in Queensland sold the railways.
Yes.
And some 27,000 railway workers lost their job. And they all voted for the ALP. And 27,000 lost their jobs. Is that right? No, there were 27,000 employed. By the time she'd finished the privatisation, there were only 7,000 people employed. Anyway, she's not there now, and that was because some good trade unionists in this country had just had it up to here with people that were selling the what once upon a time used to be called the working class, but now it's the aspirational class. You know what I mean? The blokes we represented, they weren't working in the mines to become, proud members of the working class. They were working in the mines to buy the farm next door, or to get a few head of cattle, or to buy a supermarket, or service station or something. Yeah.
So just go back to that question though, when the government, the Albanese government, I guess we can also say, the Liberal Nationals, when they're in government, they don't listen to some of these concerns. So what is it that the Australian people have to do, Bob, to get what they want done in Canberra?
I just, the great theologian Tinbergen said all that a Christian can do is take a giant problem in one small, tiny piece and hold on, if necessary, to his own personal detriment. And that is a great quote by a great theologian and Christian leader. And so what can I do? I can just get up and say, every woman that has a baby gets $60,000, because even that will not go remotely close to compensating the cost to that family. But we will not be a dying race, not on my watch. So I'd say start with the fact that we're not going to be a dying race. We will do everything humanly possible to somehow get a balance of power whereby we can inculcate into kids at school that the greatest calling on earth is motherhood. It ain't being a doctor, even though that's a great calling. No, it's not. It's motherhood. Without motherhood, there's no Australian people, no human race. So God bless the mothers. And we're going to get, I'm just pricing out, I don't know if I can afford it, but we're going to get a medal, motherhood medal, and anyone that has 3 kids, like Donald Trump, and who has 5 kids, they get to dinner with Donald Trump. And well, we're going to do what we can to, now that's on the issue of population.
Pause for a second, so I'm going to interject there to tell you about one of the things that we've been pushing against, and I'm sure you would have heard about it. You're talking about paying mothers to have children. The bizarre thing is, Bob, and I don't know if you read this recently, the Albanese government is actually paying women to have abortions. They're doing that through, there's a particular payment called the stillbirth payment, which is part of the paid parental leave stuff. And if you, I've seen the documentation, it's as absolutely rigid-edge that if someone procures an abortion deliberately at a certain time, that person is entitled to a government payment. Now, that is unbelievable. We are paying people to actually get rid of babies. To murder a poor, helpless little baby before it's born. I mean, now, I want to make a point here, George. I always say that you've got to pray for the mothers. Jesus said, we've got to be good to people. And it really is the essence of that. But I have had a number of cases, and the woman is completely out of her mind. She is so excited when she finds out she's pregnant, she's going to have a child. And she rings up the boyfriend to give him the good news. And he says, get an abortion. Shocking.
And her heart is broken. Everything she's believed in life comes to an end. And she's completely out of her mind. And parents as often as not say the same thing. And so, the poor kid is out of her mind when she makes that decision. And I have difficulty believing that a human being can make a decision to murder a poor, helpless little unborn child. I just have difficulty believing anyone wants to do that. And I think they're out of their mind when they do that. Cleo magazine, of all things, they ran a series, and it was a centerpiece series on why we're a dying race, Australians. And most women, they say they want to have babies, but they're just putting it off till they're more stable relationship or more on their feet economically. And well, the result of that is that they don't end up having babies. And it's very sad. My mob that I went to university with, they were the first career women. And, they're all twisted, embittered people. They get no one to love them. And it's so sad. Society lied to them. But now society is encouraging them to go down that pathway. But you know, my grandson stayed with me at Prismo, working with me, and but he said, you know, in church you'll find nearly half are under the age of 26 now. And I just thought, well, I had a look at church on Sunday. Yeah, pretty close to half the congregation was under 26, and all the rest were over 60. You know, so you know, there's hope for Australia, and I always believe, you know, I wrote An Incredible Race of People, because we really are an incredible race of people. You know, we started as convicts in the dregs of the earth, and we've done pretty good for ourselves.
We have indeed. Bob, a couple more questions that have come in. Dan asks, can we, assuming the Australian government, can we restrict foreign investment in residential property? Is there any reason why we shouldn't?
Well, I think there's a very good reason why we shouldn't, because if you look at the graphs and the statistics, the best investment you can make in Australia is housing and accommodation. And so rich people, particularly a lot of them trying to get out of China, are buying real estate here in Australia. And
so we should, do you believe we should
absolutely stop foreign investment in ownership of accommodation or housing, however you want to.
Probably. I mean, I'm sure you agree with this. I'm not sure I 100% know you agree with it. Stop foreign ownership of any Australian land. These countries do not allow Australians to go over and buy up land. Certainly you can't do that in China. I don't know there's any country throughout the Asia Pacific that will allow an Australian to go and buy up
Japan doesn't, China doesn't. And I would be very surprised if any countries in Asia do. Now, you know, Europe is a wreckage. You know, Europe in the days of Rome was 32% of the world's population. Now, it's not even an eighth, I don't think, of maybe a tenth, less than a tenth. Now, having said that, of course, Europe is now based in the Americas, and there's 1,000 million people in the Americas. And Christianity is very, very strong in the United States. And of course, Brazil, there's the big statue, you know, of Jesus.
The Redeemer.
So, you know, Christianity is very strong in the Americas by any, you know, compare it to days past or any time. So we want to be positive. But in Australia, I don't dismiss what other people think, but, you know, I just do what I can do. And what I can do is get out there and make a gumtree statement, right? From now on, there's no regulations stopping subdivisions. Get the hell out of here, you little, excuse my crude language, pissant public servants making all your little petty power plays. Hey, I will decide whether you can subdivide that land or not. It's my land, and if I want to subdivide it, then I will be allowed to subdivide it. You know, all right, you know, there's an argument about density of population, and I'll say, righto, I'll go along with that. But outside of that, there are no regulatory restrictions on subdivisions. And you and I both know you can live in Mackay and its environs, Townsville and its environs, like Ayr, Charters House, Ingham, Cairns, you know, with that huge hinterland around it. You can live in those places. That population over 300,000, they're bigger than Canberra. And every amenity that you really want is within an hour's drive of, you know, of where you're living. What a wonderful lifestyle. Now, we've got to advertise that. But so I'm just saying that if we're saying that people can't afford to live, and I ask people, so if you're the boss of Australia, what's the first three things you do? You know, I would say 80% now say people can't afford to live. If I roll the clock back 7 years, I don't think anyone would say that 7 years ago.
Yeah, I think you're right. This has been a post-COVID thing, and I think that all the stuff that governments did during COVID has come back to bite them. So it is an interesting thing. We are now looking at Australia where it's terrible. Prices are risen so high. I mean, I'm shocked by my grocery bill these days. And, and I talk to other people who are on, much lower incomes than I am. And I think, boy, how do you survive with the price of rent, the price of housing, the price of groceries, the price of electricity? And yet we had the Reserve Bank only last week, I think it was, say that's here to stay. It won't be going up, a whole heap more, but those high prices that we've got now are here to stay. Well, that's defeatism if there ever is defeatism.
Oh, well, of course, the banks don't want the prices to go down
No.
because they've loaned money on the basis of what they are now. But, caveat emptor, I mean, you don't need all these regulations. I mean, if someone tells you a lie, you can sue them. If they say, oh, you can get electricity switched on, you find out you can't. Well, it's again, caveat emptor, buyer beware.
Mm-hmm.
George, I just want to come back. Kayla Pike Kruger, my chief of staff.
Yep.
She come up with this idea we get dressed up as pigs. Andrew Wilkie's member for myself. And I thought it was a stupid idea, but Wilkie, he took to it like a duck to water. He couldn't get the pig suit on fast enough. And we had these little bowls of money, right? And I was cold and he was worthless.
Coles and Woolworths.
And so, but Wilkie started going and sticking his nose in my trough, and I couldn't stop laughing. So he got all the publicity. But it was absolutely astronomical. Every single one of the 7 political parties said, oh, they were moving divestment legislation. We've got in the pipeline. Of course they haven't, and they didn't. But at the time, they all said it. Woolworths wet their pants, and they brought down 401 items that day. And because they gave the game away.
Because you and Andrew Wilkie dressed in pig suits. That's that's the.
But they're all going to move divestment legislation, But the cost of food went up 100% between 1991 and 2001. Between 2001 and 2010, it went up 100%, and now it's gone up another 100% in the last 7 years. So there's a 300% markup on food. 300% markup on food. My old man would kill me if we put more than a 30% markup on clothing. We had clothing stores.
Yeah.
But my old man said, you've got to be honest and decent and act responsibly. They got 300% markup on a key basket of food items. But we're doing some serious research on that, and we're releasing the figures.
The farmers aren't really getting paid too much more, so where's it going?
Well, I mean, on the contrary, we're the lowest paid farmers in the world. And there's a lot of statistics that back that up. But I don't have to tell you that. You already know that. And as I say, look at your sugar. See, everyone's getting $700. Well, Brazil and Thailand are getting $470. We get $270. Now, all right, the price has gone through the roof for a month. That's not going to stay up there. You know that, and I know that. So I just use that as an example that's easy to grab.
So another question that's come through, Bob, not related to this, but Tom Blackford's asked, would Bob support people having the ability to vote on all government legislation to approve or reject bills? I think that'd probably be too difficult. But there's something like that called like citizen initiative and referenda, voters veto and that sort of stuff. Do you support that kind of approach?
Well, the idea that people could put legislation in, I go right along with that. I mean, the other one is not practical. I mean, you're not going to have a referendum every time you want a piece of legislation to go through.
Yeah.
It is just not possible to do it. But to citizens initiated, not referendum, but legislation, I think that there's real, go in that. If you get 10,000 signatures on a piece of legislation, I think it should go before the Parliament.
My understanding is they do that in certain European countries and also throughout states in America as well.
I was about to say states in America as well. Yeah. So it's not as if it's not well-known thing to do.
Yeah, and it hasn't. I mean, the idea that people have against it is that, oh well, people will propose crazy stuff and Australians will vote to cut their tax to zero or to.
But the legislators can say no. The legislators can say no.
But the point is that in those other countries that it hasn't the sky hasn't fallen and they haven't put in crazy stuff. Bob, I want to get back to one point before we're going to have to wrap up, and that is the free speech issue. We talked about this Islamophobia report that dropped that is absolutely going to undermine free speech. That conversation, that part of the conversation that we had about Islam, I'm very worried that if we had that this time next year, you and I would be
in jail,
tottering off to the Human Rights Commission to explain ourselves for why we, picked on poor Islam when it's a belief system that, should be open to criticism. I'm very worried about the direction this country is taking and a lot of Western countries are taking in regards to free speech. We are undermining it at a rapid rate of knots. And if you don't have free speech, you don't have democracy, as far as I'm concerned. What's your view?
Well, the old adage, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And I'll give that, it's not Islam, because I must emphasize that I've had a lot to do with Indonesia. I find them excellent people, very much like the Japanese, very well-mannered, very, good people to work with and deal with. Excellent people, they're wonderful neighbours. But that Middle Eastern crowd and African, I mean, there's 4 wars going on at the present moment. That's not including the Gaza war. Now, those people crossed the boundary, murdered 1,200 people. They blew up the Twin Towers in America. That's 3,500 people they murdered in just 2 incidents. That's not including the murdering each other, with 5 wars going on at the present moment, and the terrible persecution of Christians in Nigeria that's taking place on a massive scale. 200 little girls in a convent school taken away, just kidnapped and taken, and the government's not strong enough to do anything about it. So anyway, I'm just sort of saying that. I won't be apologising to anyone, but I make the distinction very strongly there. That Middle Eastern and African crowd, and the size of the fight in the dog, I'll give them this, they get plenty of fight in that dog, but they're underestimating the size of the fight. And we Australians, and we might have a majority of Australians in our own country, but there's still plenty of fight left in the dog.
There is.
We Australians.
I'm going to give you a bit of substance to fight over now. So I've gone through that report with a fine-tooth comb. One of the things that's in it is they say that they want to have, this is Islamophobia report, they want to have members of parliament and their staff appropriately trained in what constitutes Islamophobia. They'll have speech codes there for parliament. And if you breach something, there'll be a dob-in line as well that your constituents can dob you in if you've done anything Islamophobic in your electorate. And if you breach something, they want your party to suspend you. Now, will the Qatar Australia Party suspend its only member of parliament if he says something Islamophobic, Bob?
I doubt that. I think that we might be, all of our members, a bit guilty of statements against that crowd from Africa and the Middle East. But I was just with 2 blokes, and as the old saying used to go, black as the ace of spades. They're from Nigeria, and I said, "What brought you to Australia?" He said, "The persecution of people in Nigeria," he said, "is on a scale you can't believe."
Yeah.
And he said, "We just fled there. I assume they were Christians, but I don't know whether they were or not. But they were just fleeing persecution." But the trouble is, you say they're fleeing persecution. Well, what's the definition of persecution? Oh, the Israelis. Well, hold on a minute. You crossed the border and murdered 1,200 of their citizens. What do you think? You just do that and Nothing happens. I mean, you can blame the Russian soldiers for what they did in Berlin, but what did you think you were going to go into Russia and do what you did, and there was no payback time? Yeah, well, Berlin got the payback time.
Mhm.
Well, it's the same thing here.
So, Bob, we're going to have to wrap up because we've hit an hour and we don't want to.
Been wonderful talking to you, George.
But is there any final words for our audience, listeners? We'll probably get, we've had, I think, well over 1,000 watching now, and this will be sitting there on X and YouTube and Facebook for other people to look at in the coming weeks, days and weeks. What message do you have for all of those Australians watching and listening here, Bob?
The Gumtree movement, we Australians are standing up. And you can take your free speech, which, of course, is muzzling people that disagree with it. Tony Burke has 23% of his electorate is Islamic, right? They're from the Middle East. He is the most powerful person in the parliament, as powerful as Albanese, actually. Halfpenny wrong. I just don't think that woman has any of the traits that would identify her as the gum trees. Yeah. And the traits that in so if you're asking me, we want the gum trees to stand up. We want you to grow. And I'm sure you will. And I end on this note. 1 in 30 of us that went down the mines never came out alive. 1915. 1 in 30 of us that went in the cane fields never came out alive. 1 in 30. Now, how could that change? Well, a bloke called Theodore, 5th grade education at Chillago, north of Cairns, the middle of nowhere. He said, righto, you're Johnny Union or you get a hiding. We bash it. So needless to say, he got a lot of members of his union. And they said, where are we going with this, Ted? Oh, he said, well, we're going to take over Queensland. We're going to take over Australia. Yeah. They said, Ted, you're on a bicycle. Chillago, the middle of nowhere. There was no telephones in those days or anything. He said, oh, yeah, well, that's what we're going to do. Well, within 15 years, he'd taken over Queensland. And within 20 years, he'd taken over Australia. Now, are we anything less than that now? The most important person in Australian history. I didn't say that. Paul Keating said that. I didn't say that. Malcolm Fraser said that. But the only thing I'd agree with Malcolm Fraser and Paul Keating on would be that I would agree. So if he can do that as an Australian, what are we lesser people today? No, we're not.
I agree with you. It just takes people getting together, and that's what Citizen Go is all about.
And putting our faith in Jesus too.
Indeed. Everything in God. So if you want to be part of our movement, join Citizen Go. Go to our website, citizengo.org. We've got plenty of petitions on there. The issues that we've been talking about, whether it's the Centre for Disease Control and the Pandemic Treaty, whether it's the Islamophobia report, the Agenda 2030.
It's the heart of the Gumtree movement.
Indeed.
This organisation.
That's what we want. We want Australians standing up and taking our country back, quite frankly, because it needs to be taken back. And I thank you all very much for listening. I thank you very much, Bob Catter, for joining us.
George. Talk. My brothers, my black fellow brothers, as well.
Good on you. Thanks, Bob.